Welcome to RIoT Startup Spotlight, where innovation meets inspiration. I'm Jen Morgan, and
I'm Stella Turner.
And this is the series where we dive into the dynamic world of entrepreneurship, shining a light on the visionaries and disruptors who are shaping the future. Today, we bring you an exclusive interview with Sharon Moore, founder and CEO of Sportscale. Hi, Sharon. To begin, can you tell us a little bit about your company?
Sure. Sportscale is a female-founded software integrated product or a female-founded company that manufactures and sells an integrated product that connects a routine body weight scale with our custom-built software and mobile app, so that users can have their weights recorded automatically, and then athletes can participate in sports more safely.
And if I remember correctly, this is that like athletes from high school all the way up to professional levels have to weigh in essentially to make sure that they're healthy to be able to participate. Is that correct?
Right. So the problem that this product solves is this idea of repetitive weigh-ins. And so athletes are required in many cases, often strongly recommended in other cases, to weigh in and weigh out before and after activity sessions. And this is a gross measure of hydration change during a session. The idea is that the rules are in place so that athletes can track their change. And unfortunately, right now, that's all still done by hand. So the Sportscale solves that issue by automating the process. And the problem was originally identified when I was working at the high school level one day. But the problem, because the rules are in place across all levels, the problem exists from high school all the way up through the pros.
Yeah, it's a very cool concept. Thank you for sharing. And you touched on this a little bit, but we would love it if you could go a little bit more into some of your previous experiences that influenced this role today. Just what's your background? How did you get to where you are right now?
Right. So I am an athletic trainer. We're a member of the sports medicine team, which we're the people who run on the field when an athlete gets injured. But there's so much more that happens from a prevention standpoint. So I have been a practicing athletic trainer for almost 30 years. And while working one day for one of the staff members who I was supervising, I encountered this issue. And so I was working as a university faculty member at the time. And so I said, gosh, I've got this idea. And so I went to my tech transfer office and shared it. And from there, right, the idea was protected and we moved forward. But I should say, as I should say, really, just in my DNA, I'm a problem solver, and so I run into a problem, I want a solution. I don't like to stop at the problem. So that was sort of part of me long before I ran into this problem, which now feels like yesterday, but it was actually a decade ago. We've been developing the product and working to solve the problem.
Sharon, that's a really inspiring backstory. Can you dive a little bit deeper into what made you decide I want to do this as a company instead of just selling off the idea?
Right. That's a great question, because I don't know that any founder really knows the journey of the company that's ahead. And I certainly didn't. So it's really one decision at a time, right? And one decision builds on the decisions and the results of that decision that preceded it. So at the time, I was solving a problem, which is what I do in every sort of facet of a particularly professional life. And so then once we had the protection, the patent was issued for the idea, and the way that I knew we could get the wheels moving was to go ahead and do it myself. And and then an investment came along, and so the company has grown from a variety of circumstances, and I couldn't have known then where we would be today, and I'm hopeful that I don't know today where I might be in another 5 or 10 years. But I feel very connected to this, and I feel confident that if the industry had recognized the problem, they would have solved it already. And so I feel very connected to it because I've recognized the issue and went ahead and did something about it. And so it's really important for me to carry that through so that the industry actually has the solution.
Yeah, incredible. And what would you say, just kind of in this startup journey that you've taken yourself on, what have been some big challenges that you've encountered thus far, especially as a startup founder, and how did you overcome them?
Well, funding and financing is always a challenge. I was an academic going into the world of startup, and that afforded me a wonderful network of professionals. But it didn't, I wasn't prepared to run a business. That's not my background. My background is sports medicine. So one of the challenges is just learning to run a business, is learning to be, I didn't come in with an MBA. I didn't come in with any formal training. And so I have had to build a network. I've had to sort of do a school of hard knocks, on the job training. And then, of course, funding all of that. And, like so many, we bootstrapped as long as we possibly could, but building a hardware product, building out software, I mean, these are tremendous expenses. So I would say, from my perspective, I had to really learn the business principles that were already part of so many other founders, and they were layering on the content. I started with the content and had to sort of go backwards to the business principles. And luckily, I had some experience in other businesses I'd run or other freelance and consulting things. But and then, of course, getting the funding, and then finding the right funders, finding the right team, finding the right people who aren't just going to be short-lived in your business journey, but really are in it for the long haul, because that was really what I felt like I needed along the way. So those were some of the things. There's always a new challenge.
With that, do you have any mentors or role models who inspired you in building this business?
Well, I have mentors, and thankfully, those are actually my first 2 advisors. I should say my first 2 investors. Thankfully, my investors are their value is actually not only their capital investment, their value is their mentorship and their advisement. And so those are Rocky Butler and Matt Crisp, and each brings a different type of advisement and mentorship to me, sort of in different areas, but they're my go-to, and have been patient, because I do think it takes a different investor to invest in a startup than perhaps in companies at other stages. So they were in it for that mentorship and have been really critical to several important decisions along the way. But I have a whole host of cheerleaders, because I don't know any founder who doesn't need a pick-me-up, because it's rough and the road is certainly not smooth, and it's certainly not clear. So there are often challenges that feel so heavy you don't want to go forward, or you don't know if you can go forward. And so those cheerleaders, right? So my husband, always a cheerleader. I have a close colleague who has always been an advisor from a content standpoint, but also just as a friend standpoint. So those people you really have to surround yourself with. So I wouldn't have gotten this long in the journey without those folks, and a host of others as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely important to have a good circle of support around you. And especially on startup journey, if you could almost be that person for someone else and summarize a couple pieces of advice for an aspiring entrepreneur based on these experiences and lessons you've learned throughout your journey, what would you say to someone?
I don't know that I have great advice, because I will say this. You've got to be in it. You have to bring your enthusiasm and your passion and your commitment. This is not for the hobbyist. Especially when you start taking investment money. This is important. These are important commitments. And so you have to be in it. It does often require grit and pushing through it. If you're a person that's easily dissuaded from things, I would suggest not going the entrepreneur route, particularly with product development as core to your business. I think a person who has ideas, who is willing to sort of let life take them. If you're smart, you stay committed, you're willing to sort of let situations happen as opposed to feeling like you can control everything. I think being an entrepreneur is wonderfully fulfilling, but you certainly have to have internal motivation, grit, commitment, passion, and definitely bring your enthusiasm A game every single day. And the other thing I would say is really be willing to hear different people's perspective on things. Even though it's your company, many people have good sage advice, and it may not be exactly able to be translated into your company, but think about what you can learn from it and apply it. It's almost like you have to know enough, but you have to be willing to learn every day too. So there's an interesting balance there. That's what I've got.
Sharon, I think that's spot on and definitely hones in on the struggle of the entrepreneur, but also a good reminder for everyone who's down in the trenches that sometimes it feels tough, feels like you're pulling yourself through that mud and it's never going to end, but there is light at the end of the tunnel for sure. That's all the questions that we have. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. I hope that you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you both.